welcome to Overtime Hockey Talk. My name is Mark Paul. My co-host Justin Baker is joining us via the Skype. And on today's show, we are going to be breaking down the top 20 centers that are currently in the playoffs right now. We'll be doing the wingers, defensemen, and goaltenders all throughout this week. So every day of this week, there will be a new episode with a new top 20. For goalies, we're doing top 15 because it just felt a little bit like once we get to 20, we might as well do all the goalies. So we're doing top 15 for the goalies. But we're going to rank everybody that's in the playoffs as NHL.com attempted to do. Justin, I don't know if you actually read through all the rankings that NHL.com did, but I think they're under the impression that the Sharks and the Kings both made the playoffs.
Well, it's funny because I looked at their list, and I think it was on NHL Tonight that they posted it. And they had some, they had like in the top 20 centers, they had Jack Eichel. And I'm like, who the frick cares right now? Because you're going to do this again come October when the playoffs are over with, and nobody's going to give a crap that you put these people in the list now because it's playoffs. That's all people want to hear about. That's all I want to hear about.
I don't want any. There are no one. Everyone on my list, they're in the playoffs because that's what we did. We're doing playoffs. So I'm not going to include I think they had 5 or 6 players that weren't in the playoffs total on their list, which I guess in some ways shows you how bad the 7 teams were that missed the playoffs. But No, we're just not including them. So these are all players that I should say when I say the playoffs, I use that word loosely. The 24 teams that are in the quote unquote preliminary playoffs, whatever you want to call them. The NHL they did come out and say that stats accumulated in the preliminary round will count towards all-time playoff stats. So wow. These are the playoffs. They're just this year's little weird variation of the playoffs. So we're going with that. We're saying it's the playoffs. So with that said, we have the centers. We're going to start at number 20 and work our way back. And I guess I didn't do any just missed. I felt like a 20 list was pretty good. But if you did some just miss, you can toss those out now. Otherwise, we'll start at 20. Did you do any just miss?
Yeah, for all these top 20s, okay. I threw in one just miss just for the heck of it.
All right. Well, then my just missed would be because somebody I did consider putting in here was Nazem Kadri. He would just miss my list at number 21. Coming off 30 goals just 2 years ago. So he's definitely somebody who could get sparked in the playoffs. He will show up. It's just a matter of how long he can avoid suspension.
Well put. Yeah. So for me, the just miss is Nicholas Backstrom. A lot of people probably sitting there thinking, the Washington Capitals are going to be a powerhouse, hopefully in the playoffs. But to me, he's going to play second fiddle to another center who made my list later on.
Okay. All right. Yeah, he makes my list, and the other person you're talking about missed my list. So,
all right.
With that said, let's get it rolling. Who's your number 20 center in the playoffs?
Jonathan Toews for the Chicago Blackhawks. To me, obviously, we know what he can do at both ends of the ice. He's probably one of the top face-off guys in the league. But to me, it's going to be a little difficult for the production to be there. I think, he had an up year. He finished with 60 points in 70 games. But come playoff time, I think it's going to be a little tighter. And, can he get it done without playing with a guy like Patrick Kane? He's going to be playing with Saad and, what's his face. And so, for me, number 20 is Jonathan Toews.
Okay, Jonathan Toews also goes and misses my list. He did have a pretty solid year, just 18 goals, which is I guess why I maybe have him a little bit lower. I'd say that he just misses along with Kadri. My number 20 is center for the St. Louis Blues, Braden Shen.
Ooh,
picks up 58 points this year, 25 goals. And always a threat to get hot. He is somebody who can, I think in a 5-game series, I look for Braden Shen to maybe make a difference. He's usually a quick start, and he can get hot. And so that's the reason that he jumps those other 2 guys.
Yeah, I don't blame you. And for me, when I look at centers, right, one of the criteria I had for my list here was, are you the number one guy on your team come playoff time? And if you're not, are you going to be a big point producer? Are you going to be a guy who potentially could be a number one guy on another team? And Braden Shen, again, I think he's playing second fiddle to Ryan O'Reilly, but he's still
that's not a bad guy to play second fiddle to.
No, absolutely not. Shen's going to be a great point producer and a great second line center for this team, and then it gives them flexibility too, right? If something happens with Ryan O'Reilly, he's a guy you can trust to come in and play number one.
All right, let's go number 19.
Yeah, number 19, a guy who finished with 50 points in 69 games, a bit of a downer for me, but I think he can turn it on, and he has the potential. He needs to produce, and that's Tyler Seguin, a guy who can put up 30 to 40 goals, in my opinion, but a little bit of a down year for a lot of people on the Dallas Stars. 17 goals only through 69 games, and I fully expect him to hit the reset button, come back, and maybe produce a little bit more at a better pace than he did in the regular season.
Yeah, the Stars are a difficult team to drop players, like a Jamie Benn, too, for wingers. Like, I don't have Tyler Seguin on my list. They do play a defensive style game. Would he rank higher if they played a more wide open game and he was picking up easier points? Probably. But just because statistically he didn't look great, and at times it's almost like Seguin goes through these big slumps, and then he comes back and he's hot, and then he slumps. And I don't know. This isn't an indication of how their team will do. I just don't think that right now he's necessarily better than or playing the way that he should compared to the rest of the guys on my list. This is why I have at 19, I have Nicklas Backstrom. I have him on here kind of based on what I know he can do in the playoffs. Another like Seguin, not a total torture in the playoffs, but Nicklas Backstrom, he can get it done in the playoffs. We know he will see some time alongside Alexander Ovechkin. We know that there's a good chance he'll play with him the whole time, definitely on the power play. So I think that based on that, I want him in my wheelhouse over some other guys. So Backstrom is my 19, and I think he had a down year this year too. So I think this layoff for him will be good.
Yeah, hopefully picks it up, because he just he's got that big contract extension, so he's got to show it. Yep.
And my number 18, it goes to a guy who actually NHL.com had, I believe, ranked at number 9. He was the 12th highest scorer in the league. That is Mika Zibanejad. I have him a lot lower than what the NHL.com has him. I know he scored 41 in 57. He had his best season of his entire career. He had crazy, 21-38 was his average game time. I mean, he's playing more than most defensemen play in a game, mostly because there's not a whole lot else behind Mika Zibanejad, which, ironically enough, my autocorrect made him Mike Zibanejad. So apparently Google wants to Americanize Mika. But I don't think, if I'm looking at this and I go, all right, who do I want to have on my team? Of course, Zibanejad had one of the better seasons. I think that a lot of that can be attributed to his line mate in Panarin, but I look at him and I go, well, there's 17 other guys that I think I'd rather have on my team over Zibanejad. So that would be my reason for putting him considerably lower than what NHL.com did, or maybe some others might.
Okay, yeah, I got him a little higher, but I mean, he did play a majority of the time with Chris Kreider rather than Panarin, who played a lot of his time with Strome.
That's right.
At center. That's right. So yeah, maybe a reason why he's a little higher on most people's list, but we'll see.
Well, and I mean, obviously your production is boosted when you're playing away from Panarin as well.
Sure, yeah, a lot of top D men are they're
focusing on Panarin. Yep.
Absolutely, yeah. So my number 18, a guy who was kind of like yours, a little bit higher on a lot of people's list. But for me, again, he drops down. He's a number 2 center on this team and really is horrible at faceoffs. But again, he's been consistent at his production in terms of, his first 2 seasons, and that's Elias Pettersson. 66 points both years. This guy comes in with a lot of potential to make some noise. This will be his first crack at the playoffs. So I'm excited to see what he can do. He's got speed to burn, and he's got a great winger who may or may not have made my list of the top 20 wingers. That's JT Miller, who I think is a very good complementary piece for him, who brings a lot of grit so Pettersson can get some more space and really just, take off.
Okay, yeah. Pettersson I have just a little bit higher. I have him sitting at 16. Sandwiched in between him and Zibanejad is Matthew Barzal at 17. So Barzal, top center on the Islanders. I don't think there's any questioning that he should be on this list. You might have him a little bit higher, but I think this is probably about where he belongs. He kind of had a little bit downer of a year, I guess, but he still is somebody who, I mean, the Islanders are going to rely heavily on Matthew Barzal. He had 60 points this year, almost a point per game guy, and he really is he's the guy. If they can get him going, the Islanders have a good chance at moving on.
Yeah, I read some interesting stats today, and one of them that they were focusing in on, they were looking at the top three guys for the MVP, right? McKinnon, Draisaitl, and Panarin, and they were looking at the primary guys that pass, right, that set up their team for the most offensive opportunities. And Barzal was up there in the top four with names like Connor McDavid and Panarin, and it was actually kind of shocking. I'm surprised with the lack of big name stars around him, that he's the guy that sets up the big scoring chances.
Yeah, I mean, and you have to think of that preliminary round series, Islanders Panthers. It's going to be Barkov Barzal, and I tend to lean Barkov, but if Barzal can have a big series, that'll make a big difference in that one. Who do you have at 16?
Well, let's make.
Oh, sorry, you're 17
first. Yeah.
Go 17, 16.
All right, at number 17, I've got Sebastian Aho. Carolina Hurricanes. Actually, it's funny. I read today there Justin Williams put out a tweet. They had a little breakfast buffet menu, and the teams listed. They had the Florida Panthers and the Carolina Panthers. It was just cracking me up.
Nice.
So yeah, Carolina Hurricanes center Sebastian Aho. We know what this guy's all about. He's 66 points in 68 games. He's 38 goals this year. Just a tremendous goal scorer. He can do it all. And I'd be excited to see what he can do in the playoffs now that he's got one good run under his belt, to see what he can follow that up with. And at number 16, Matthew Barzal for me, again, like I talked about, being in that one of those top guys in the primary offensive production, category. And obviously he's the go-to guy for the Islanders, right? If there's any offense that's going to be had with the New York Islanders this playoffs, it's going to go through this guy more than likely.
Yeah.
And I love his speed. He's probably one of the best guys when it comes to turning on the fly, and he can really leave some defensemen flat-footed, so he'll be fun to watch.
All right. So moving into our top 15 now, who do you have sitting at? Let's go 15, 14, 13.
Oh, okay. We're racking them off. So
yeah, we'll rack.
At 15, I've got my vote for the best defensive forward this year. It's Sean Couturier from the Philadelphia Flyers. I love this guy's all-around game, and it's great to see him blossom into an offensive powerhouse. Now, number 14, I've got another great two-way center on a very offensive-minded team from the Tampa Bay Lightning. That's Braden Point. And at number 13, Mark Scheifele from the Winnipeg Jets. Okay,
yeah, I've got pretty much the same idea. Point at 15, Aho 14, and Couturier at 13. I put Couturier up higher just based on I think he also has the experience, but the way that he plays I think is so important to the Philadelphia Flyers, who tend to have a few guys who are really heavy on their offensive game, and I think that having Sean Couturier there makes him a really important piece. And I think come playoff time, you're Selke type of guys, which I think that we put him probably in the same category as a Ryan O'Reilly, that if the Flyers are going to win, he is likely a huge proponent of them winning.
Oh yeah, without a doubt. Yeah, this guy's key to their success. And I mean, we know about Claude Giroux and what he can do, but he looks much better on the wing with Couturier at center. Yeah,
I think Braden Point has kind of there was a minute there where it was almost like, wow, Braden Point he's by far the number one center on this team. I don't really look at the Lightning anymore and go, all right, number one, number two, number three. It's just, I mean, you've got Stamkos and you've got Braden Point. You just have 1A, 1B. It doesn't really matter which guy's 1A, 1B. Point just,
and that's what you want if you're a coach,
right? Sure, yeah. It's just you just have two steady top six lines. Really, they've got a great top nine, but their top six is can compete with anyone in the league. And when you consider the fact that he's coming off last year, had 92 points and 41 goals. This year, just slightly down, 64 and 66. But Tampa definitely wasn't playing that all-out way in the regular season that they were early on in 2018-19 when they set the record or tied the record for wins and then smoked it in the playoffs. So at this point, they have no excuse. Like, this is the Lightning's year. They need Point to be great. I did still rank Stamkos higher than Braden Point. Just, I think, based off of maybe potential of like what I believe they're both capable of, and ultimately who I think I'd rather have on my team for these playoffs. Maybe not long, for the next 5 years. Who am I going to take? Well, I'm going to take the younger Braden Point, but it's besides the point. Okay, let's. You mentioned you had Scheifele at 13. I have him at 12, so let's just go your number 12, and we'll kind of round out that group.
Yeah, number 12, a guy you already mentioned, Mika Zibanejad, a guy who finished 5th in goal scoring, and he was 12th in points among forwards and, all skaters in general. I mean, this guy came out, and I remember, when he came back from injury, racked off goal after goal after goal. One game he had 5, the next game he had the hat trick. I mean, this guy was just lights out for so long, and like you talked about earlier, when you're not playing on a line with Panarin, maybe that does kind of benefit him a lot more. But at the same time, I'm like, this guy's the go-to center. He's the number one guy. And, I think if New York's going to have any success in these playoffs or even the preliminary rounds, it's going to be him and Panarin. They've got to drive all the offense for this team. Yeah.
7th in the league in points per game was Zibanejad this year. So definitely had, but like by far his best year. I mean, he had a nice little coming out party, which when you consider Zibanejad's, he's 27 years old. So it's kind of at that age where you don't necessarily expect somebody to have a blow up year. But I guess the year before he did have 74 points, but he had 74 points in 82 games, whereas he's got 75 points in 57 games. Like, this is a whole nother Zibanejad that we were seeing. I mean, he likely, if he played all 82, he'd have scored over 50 goals.
Oh, absolutely.
Which shatters his 30-goal mark from before. So definitely having someone else on his team to take away some of the limelight, so that they're not all focused on Zibanejad, because let's face it, 2 years ago, that's really all you had to do was focus on him. He was much of what they had offensively, so that certainly helped him as well. Okay, my number 12, I said it was Mark Scheifele, so we'll go. Who do you have at 11 and 10?
All right, 11 and 10. I could flip-flop these guys, to be quite honest, because technically they are both number 2 centers on their team, but they're both tremendously good and could be number 1 centers on just about any other team. For me, number 11 this year is John Tavares from the Toronto Maple Leafs. This guy is lights out every year. A little bit more of a down year versus the last couple years.
Which he said he was hurt the whole time. So
right, and coaching change doesn't help that much either. So we'll see what he's able to do now that he's hit the reset, got healthy. So I'm excited to see what he can do. And then at number 10, I've got Evgeny Malkin, who, just the resume is unreal in terms of what he does in the playoffs, and he's shown he can be the guy without Crosby there too. So I love his game, and hopefully the age isn't catching up with him because he is getting up there. But for me, he's still good enough to be number 10.
Just 74 points in 55 games for Malkin this year.
Only.
nothing to write home about. So I have at 11, I've got Stamkos, and at 10, I have Ryan O'Reilly. So I have actually, I'll just go ahead, and 9, I have Tavares, and 8, I have Malkin. So I rank those guys a little bit higher. I'm sure that you have Ryan O'Reilly in your somewhere in your top 9, and I think some of his, he won the Conn Smythe last year, so there's no doubt that he is a weapon in these playoffs, and he'll play very well. I also wonder, last year's playoffs, it was such a crazy year for the St. Louis Blues. How replicable is that for the Blues, and how well is Ryan O'Reilly really going to play? I mean, in reality, he had 12 goals in the regular season in 71 games. Didn't really have a great goal scoring year. Not that he's necessarily relied upon for scoring tons of goals, but 12 goals is the least amount of goals that he's ever had in his career outside of his rookie season and the lockout year, but we won't count that one. So it was definitely his worst goal scoring year by far. So I'd say he's in a little bit of a down position. I'm willing to bank on the fact that O'Reilly will turn it on in the playoffs, but how much of a factor is the fact that, hey, you already won? Will somebody want to win more than you? That's entirely possible. So I have him a little bit lower based off that. And Stamkos, I think we're just all waiting to see what Stamkos can do in the playoffs. You know, I want to have him a little higher. He had a good year, 66 and 57, almost 30 goals, but I'm just waiting to see what he can do in the playoffs. I've kind of lost confidence in him once once we're in a position where we need to win. I want to see him be the guy. And so I have him currently outside the top 10, but very easily could be in the top 10.
Yeah, I don't blame you. So for me at number 9, I've got Sasha Barkov, a guy at least I know you and I are both excited to see in these playoffs because
Sure.
This is a guy who he plays so great at both ends of the ice. This guy's got a lot of speed, a lot of talent. He's going to be playing with a great winger with Huberdeau on his side, and so that'll only.
You just called him Huberdeau. I like it. That's I love it. Sorry, I had to point that out.
No, please.
That just made me so happy.
Yeah, I've heard a lot of weird pronunciations of his name, but dude. So yeah, Barkov for me comes in at number 9. At number 8, Patrice Bergeron, maybe a little lower than most people would expect given his playoff history. This guy does show up. This guy is one of the best face-off guys on the ice, and I mean he centers that top line for a reason. And when you've got 2 elite wingers on your side, he's only going to produce. And I mean, you look at his numbers from the regular season. I mean, he still managed to put up 30 goals each of the last 3 seasons. And for a guy who, a lot of people are wondering when he's going to slow down, he's getting up there in age. I think he's like 35 years old. Yeah. So you're at the point in your career where maybe you do. And especially the Bruins, where they play a little bit harder, a little bit more of a defensive game. It's just, he's not really slowing down that much. And, he's playing with Marchand and Pasternak, who are
other guys that have to shoot the puck too, which, Marchand has 28 goals, Pasternak is 48. So between the three of them, they have basically 100 goals, over 100 goals between the three of them.
Yeah, we know the offense goes through this line on this team for sure. And then number 7 for me, Steven Stamkos. You talked about it. He's a guy that I expect to really engage in these playoffs and really produce a lot more because, I mean, look at it. He's had 3 times in his career where he's gone more than a round. And it seems to go every other year, right? I mean, you look at the first time he was in the playoffs, 18 games. The next time he was in, it was 4, then 26, then 1, then 17, then 4 last year. And so, again, I kind of expect, Tampa Bay to rebound from what they were doing last year and that misery of a series that it was. Makes my blood boil. But and
he's always been fine in the playoffs, but
right.
And I mean, he had in 17-18, he gets 7 goals, 9 assists in 17 games. He played pretty well, but he's never really had that playoff where he blows up in goals.
Right. And
it could be this year.
30 years, yeah, I sure hope so. And at 30 years old, right, this rest only helps those guys that are maybe a little bit more seasoned, a little bit more what you call the veteran players. And, he could be a guy on a team where he doesn't have to go out and play 22 minutes, 21 minutes a night because he's got another center behind him to help him out and Braden Point. So hopefully it translates into a lot of success because I fully expect this guy, and I'm hoping he's at least a point per game, if not more, type of player.
I mean,
with
he's got
goals.
23 goals in 70 playoff games, and then he has 422 goals in 803 regular season games. I mean, he scores more than every other game. More than 0.5 goals a game in the regular season. Then he basically cut that in half in the playoffs, which I know goal scoring goes down in the playoffs, but not by half. So something happens to him in the playoffs, and whether that's just people are more honed in on him or what, but he does have a little bit more trouble in the playoffs. Okay, we'll move on. My number 7, I had Patrice Bergeron at 7, so not far off. So it's Tavares 9, Malkin 8, Bergeron 7. And I'll just give you my my 6 just to kind of round this out. We'll go into the top 5 from there. 6, I have Alexander Barkov. So,
all right. Yeah, love it.
who is your 6?
My number 6 is Ryan O'Reilly.
Okay, so you have him much higher. Okay.
Yes, I love this guy's game, and I love St. Louis's game in general. I think he's tailor-made for this team and how they play the game, and obviously it showed last year with the Stanley Cup. And I think, again, you talked about it, a down year, but I think come playoff times he's had an opportunity to rest. And I think for most teams, especially those that go deep in the playoffs, you kind of see them getting a little tired, a little bit more beat up come playoff times because they've been going hard for so long. And this huge break here, I think, can only help a team like St. Louis. And I assume that the production for Ryan O'Reilly is going to be just as good, if not better, than last year.
So my question for you is: you're saying that you would rather have Ryan O'Reilly over Evgeny Malkin, John Tavares, nothing to do with salary or anything like that, just pure player? You'd rather have him over Bergeron, Malkin, Stamkos, Tavares, Barkov? You'd rather have him more than those guys?
Right now, based on this year and maybe a little bit in the last year, absolutely.
Okay.
I'd take him. Yeah.
All right. That's exactly why I have him at 10, because all those. I guess I've got a Stamkos one notch lower than him, but yeah, I think he had a really great playoff. I think he's a good player, and for that reason, he is at number 10 right now. But I think that it'll be short lived. I don't see him living in this slot for very many more years. I think there's a lot more talented players behind him. He just happened to turn it on big time last year, but I hope he can do it again because it would be fun to see. Prove me wrong, Ryan. Okay, let's head into the top 5. It sounds like we have the exact same top 5. We'll just find out the order at which these players are, and let's go 5-4. We'll do 5-4. Who do you have 5-4?
Okay, number 5, I've got Austin Matthews. And at number 4, I've got Nathan MacKinnon. Obviously, we know Matthews is the finisher, right? He's the goal scorer. This guy can, put up goals with the best of them in this league. And he obviously had his best year in goal scoring at 47. And had we had an 82-game season, there's no doubt he would have cracked 50 for the first time in his career.
Yeah, he would have found a way to score 3 more goals, I'm sure.
Right. Yeah, and I fully expect him to break that last year. But for me, I look at when push comes to shove, Nathan MacKinnon's a guy who I think, can carry a team where I haven't seen that maybe out of Austin Matthews quite yet. I have no doubt Matthews is totally capable of it, but right now what I've seen, MacKinnon do with no help around him, no offensive players, Rantanen getting injured, Landeskog out, all these guys with long droughts, he still manages to keep this team in the top 4 of the Western Conference so they can, get out of that preliminary round.
Okay, yeah, I agree with Matthews at 5. That's exactly where I have him. He's almost that, he's never been out of the first round, but he's never played bad in the playoffs. I mean, I guess in 17-18 he did struggle a little bit. He only had 2 points in 7 games, but last year 5 goals in 7 games. The first year in the playoffs, 4 goals in 6 games. So he doesn't necessarily slow down in the playoffs, but I think we all want to see him win a round, move on. We need to see that out of him, where we've seen that from these other guys. It's why I have Matthews at 5. I've got actually Sidney Crosby at 4.
Wow. Okay.
I have MacKinnon at 3. I just don't think that. Would I love to have Crosby on my team? Absolutely. Do I think that he's phenomenal? Yes. Do I think that he is a little more prone to getting hurt than these other 3 guys? I do. I am a little bit worried about that. And I also, when I think of MacKinnon, there's Kadri behind him, but Crosby's got Malkin behind him. There's always that safety net. And there's always that, well, if we put all our resources towards Crosby, we're going to be killed because Malkin's almost as good. Whereas I think with Colorado, who they're going to focus on. Go ahead. If Kadri beats us, that's fine. We're just not going to let MacKinnon beat us. So I think that he's in a position where he really is the guy. And I think he just had a flat out better year and he managed to do it well. The rest of his team came up from the farm. He was playing with AHL players at times. So I think that's a big reason why I say MacKinnon. He's on his way. He's one of the top guys in the league. We all know that.
Okay. Yeah, can't argue with that.
So let's go 3, 2, 1.
All right, at number 3, I've got Sidney Crosby. Again, his numbers are kind of slipping a little bit, but maybe that's due to injury. And again, you talked about it. Push comes to shove. If I've got to ride a guy, maybe I'm a little bit more hesitant to take Crosby because at this point in his career, he just isn't staying healthy as long as I want him to. Whereas this guy at number 2 for me, Leon Draisaitl, this guy's incredible. He's shown now that he can do. He's proven everybody. Maybe he didn't really need to before, but outside of Edmonton, I think everybody wanted to see it. But he can do it without McDavid. And there were long stretches where McDavid was out this year, and Draisaitl just took this team and went ahead and did it, like you said, with a lot of AHL players, right? And he's kind of slowly making a star out of Kyler Yamamoto. He's a guy who maybe you want to keep your eye on come these playoffs because he could potentially be a point per game guy. Regular season had 10 points in 10 games playing alongside Draisaitl, and there's a good reason why.
Yeah, I've got the same one too, and that is because I actually I was like, is there a way I can get Draisaitl at 1? I don't think anyone will ever take me seriously ever again if I do that. So I couldn't do it. I do think
you'd like to.
Yeah, I'd like to. I am wondering if they'll play together, if they'll play separate, what that's going to look like in the 5-game series. Like, I think in the 5-game series, you just put them together and just let them do their thing.
Yeah.
And worry about the rest later, because you'll likely try and match them up with Kane as much as you can, because you'll keep the puck away from Kane as much as possible, and that's it. If you can do that, you're going to beat the Blackhawks. There's no doubt about it. Especially since they might not have Corey Crawford, and that might be rough.
Yeah,
it could be a quick series, but yes, the Edmonton Oilers taking 1-2. Either way you look at it, I'm okay with even doing like a 1A, 1B, because it's looking like Leon Draisaitl, is going to be almost as good. Like, they somehow hit the lottery with him and drafting him.
And
at
it's
5.
funny.
It's the one time they didn't pick first overall, and they got a great player.
Oh my gosh. And it's funny too, because when he signed that extension, I remember, you had some reservations. Like, I don't know if I'd given this guy $8.5 million. Now we're like, what a flipping bargain!
Yeah, yeah.
This is. He had a point per game, better than Connor McDavid at 1.55 versus 1.52. So how can you complain when you got two guys that are capable of those kind of numbers?
Absolutely. Well, hey, there's our top 20 centers in the playoffs. Stay tuned for more rankings coming out throughout the week, and we'll talk to you guys really soon. You can find us on Twitter at OT Hockey Talk. Let us know what you thought of the list. If there's anybody missing on there that you think should be in there, throw that our way. Enjoy the exhibition games, and we'll talk to you soon.